are popping in, we'll give people an opportunity to get connected, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So grateful to be in this space with each of y'all, truly, whether it is still morning for you, depending on where you're joining us, or the afternoon, like me, over here on the East Coast. So grateful to be here. So I want to be mindful of our time and honor everyone's time. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Please be advised that we are recording the session. So just want to
recording in progress.
Aware of that. And so, hello, my name is Kim Young. I'm a licensed clinical social worker out in Virginia. I'm originally from California. Even though, I identify as a social worker professionally, I like to really say I'm an expert troublemaker and a social weaver and connector, right? Because I think that's really the roots, at least for me, of how I understand showing up fully in this work. As I mentioned, really grateful to be here with y'all. Even though what is bringing us together feels like a culmination of some beautiful rage. And I know that's a place I love to exist in, because I know that rage is nothing but some energy that we can use to make good in this world and cause some amazing trouble. And so we are gathered here to address what many of us have been focused on since August 5th, when the Association of Social Work Boards released their data report. And we found out what a lot of us already knew about the various exams that the ASWB administers. And so rage was activated, action has been happening. And so just with this Stop ASWB campaign, folks have seen it circulating on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, through email listservs, all kind of stuff. And I'm so happy to announce that as of today, within the last 12 days, there's been 3,600 plus signatures on that change.org petition. So shout out to us, right? Shout out to good organizing, shout out to good collaboration, shout out to good troublemaking. And we certainly want to continue to see the action happen at the state level for sure. And I know we'll talk through some of that. And so there has been just overwhelming response for this campaign. And we know collective action can really make change happen. But we also know the importance of hearing stories of impact. And so we're going to be joined today by 4 speakers, which I'm going to make room for them to introduce themselves. But the first one up that we're going to hear from is Cassie Walker. And I hope Cassie is, I didn't see if Cassie is still with us, but I'm going to swing it over to Cassie to introduce themselves and then share the story.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cassie. Cassandra is my full name. I am a licensed clinical social worker in Illinois. I do a lot of things, and I'm here today to talk with y'all a bit about the history of this test, the history of this struggle, and the impact on social workers in the public. I have taken both the master's level and clinical test because although Illinois got rid of master's level testing in 2020, I had already unfortunately had to take it. And those tests were not a very good experience for me. I did pass them both the first time, but it was a matter of being in the test and being furious the whole time and having to keep that on lock in order to get through it while noting this is wrong, I would never do this. This would destroy this family, but also having done the prep and knowing that that's the answer they wanted. And so these tests have a long storied history of being opposed by Black social workers and other folks who we are seeing not passing these tests. And so from the get-go, Black social workers, National Association of Black Social Workers, and other organizations of Black folks oppose these tests because we know and have known for a very long time that standardized testing has massive racial biases and is used as gatekeeping measures to legally prevent people from entering the field. And those people tend to be Black, Latina, Indigenous, disabled. And so Some of those numbers we don't even have. So for years, we said, don't implement the test. They implemented the test. We said, okay, where's the data? We don't have any data. We don't have that kind of data. So we were lied to. And these mechanisms of professionalization that we're talking about here were created, again, by folks who did not believe Black people should be the high-powered professionals. They should be the grunt work sanitarians. And that was explicitly what Abraham Flexner noted in his Flexner report, which is part of how our professionalization in North America is set up, is from that very report, which told us that Black people should be sanitarians, not doctors, not surgeons, because he was focused on a specific medical. And so these histories got us here. And so now when we talk about this, we're talking about tests that prevent much needed help at a time where we are seeing over and over again, every week is a new slew of articles about the lack of services, the increased need, the fact that Black folks need Black folks to be in these fields. And then and then the Association of Social Work Boards is implementing and utilizing a test that specifically keeps us out. And they're asking us to slow down and to stop. And history shows us that's not what we need to do here. We have more than 40 years of various kinds of data, from numbers and analytics to anecdotes and stories. We know that this is racist. We know that this is ableist tests. We know that these tests don't work, and the public they purport to protect doesn't include us. And that's not acceptable for a field that's claim to fame is and call to action is supposed to be justice and equity. And so I'm here today to help raise that awareness, the fact that this is not a new fight. This is something that generations of social workers have been fighting. And this is a really important time because we now have the final straw that they said that we needed to hopefully enact some change. It's also worth noting that racist testing in professions is also not new. We have histories in places of New York where other professions like firefighters have taken folks responsible for these tests that are racist and that are clearly biased and continue to use them, have successfully taken them to court to remove the tests. And so this petition is a first step. This petition is an awareness raising so that people know these histories, so that people understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why this is a problem, and why it's not an individual problem as is proposed by ASWB. But it is a systemic racist problem, a systemic oppression issue that is keeping people out of jobs, out of the profession, keeping people from being able to access services. And that historically and currently is still negatively impacting the Black community most of all, and the Indigenous community and the Latina communities as well. And I find it interesting and suspect that yet again, the people who have been harmed most by these systems are the people not passing this test. That tells us something, and it has always told us something.
Thank you so much, Cassie, for sharing your words and your experiences and just highlighting, right, that with that report, it really did seem like the ASWB was seeking to transfer the responsibility for filling the test over to the test taker and not to the actual system, because what they use that language, that stereotype threats, for the reason that Black and brown folks were not passing.
Which again, what are in these tests? If we're, let's for a moment, let's do an exercise, right? And I do this with my clients. if it's stereotype threat on this massive a level, what is in these tests that is triggering this level of stereotype threat across all of these tens of thousands of test takers of specific races and specific experiences?
Yeah, that is a question we all must grapple with. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from, and I'm so happy that I get to meet you for the first time virtually. I can't wait to actually see you in person. But next, we're going to hear from Gerald Joseph. So we can pull Gerald up to be able to share their personal experience of harm and just I'm going to let y'all know, like, Gerald, we are war ready for you against the ASWB and all the harm they have caused you throughout your process. So really happy to hear from you today. So y'all, let's welcome Gerald.
Hi, thank you, Kim. And hello, everyone, fellow members of the social work profession, media, and the community at large. Just a little bit of background about myself. I graduated with my master's in social work in 2018. I'm a current registered supervisee in Virginia, and I currently practice as a medical social worker in a primary care clinic. I'm serving the indigent community outside of Washington, D.C. As a current ASWB clinical candidate, I have faced numerous attempts as well as barriers to pass and eventually obtain independent clinical licensure. A year ago, I took my initial examination in September of 2021, and I missed by 3 points. Subsequently, I immediately engaged in tutoring, sought colleagues for support, test prep kits to learn how to think like the exam. I made additional attempts, missing by 7, 3, 1, and most recently 5 points after battling a moderate case of COVID-19. As a frontline worker, this experience has been traumatizing on top of the occupational trauma I have experienced from the multi-year pandemic. This experience from the association has created heightened anxiety, episodic depression, and spurred a sense of demoralization. I actually questioned myself if I wanted to continue to practice as a social worker. Despite my self-advocacy, I have received limited support from the Association of Social Work Boards due to exam security, and the association advising for me to work with the state licensing board to vocalize my concerns. This tenuous process is rooted in white supremacy and is blatantly discriminatory based on the recent data analysis. This has impacted me financially, in which I have spent over $1,500 between testing fees and test prep. Additionally, I have missed out on additional job prospects and improving my overall compensation. The recent data release from the Association of Social Work Boards has been validating, despite historical statements from the association denying the collection of demographic data. It is my hope to see swift actions now as an ASWB candidate. I'm actually planning to take the exam next month. The harms the association has caused is impacting the community that I immediately serve in Northern Virginia and beyond. It is impacting fellow colleagues that aspire to obtain one of the various levels of licensure. If we are able to address the harms now, we can see a stronger and more robust social work profession, which currently makes up 60% of the mental health workforce per SAM-HSA. My training and clinical experiences were rigorous. I have not faced an ethical violation, and I'm more than an examination score in order to serve my community and the populations that face financial and systemic barriers for mental health treatment. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Gerald, and just know you are worthy. And I do question if social work is worthy of people like you, but you are worthy. And so thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Teasley, who is the Dean of the University of Utah School of Social Work and also the President of the National Association of Deans and Directors for SSW. I don't know what those letters mean, but I'm hoping Dr. Teasley would tell us.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm actually no longer the dean. I'm actually the senior vice president of academic affairs, better known as the provost. And I am the president of the National Association of Deans and Directors of Social Work, which is really an organization that prepares leaders for social work education in terms of deans, directors, and department chairs. And so we have been for some time as an organization actually talking to ASWB about release of the data. I personally talked with the former CEO several times, as well as several other organizations have engaged in advocacy in terms of requesting for the release of the data. So we do applaud them in finally releasing the data. It is much more egregious than what we thought of. And let me just backtrack for a minute. I've actually taken the license exam myself, actually passed the exam the first time. But like Ms. Walker, I took it and I go, this is not how we would handle things in certain communities. But I did what was needed to pass the test. And my point there is that that should not happen. People should not have to second guess the knowledge of their community. So we have asked not only for the release of data, but the release of item analysis of the test, because we don't know what's in the test. What about critical race theory? What about African-American perspectives? What about Afrocentric theory? We don't know if any of that is in the test. And so therefore, I have really called it Jim Crow licensing for a long time, because we don't know what's in the test and they won't release the data of what's in the test. So the National Association of Social Work, the National Association of Deans and Directors have called for the release of the psychometric properties of the exam, as well as some understanding of what scales mean in terms of item analysis. Only then will we get to the root of this. Now, this is really ironic, and it has created a crisis within the profession. The release of the data shows at least the 20-point gap between our Anglo-American brothers and sisters and minority groups such as African Americans, Native Americans, and our Latinx brothers and sisters. That's really unacceptable. We also know that African Americans pay the most in terms of their license examination for their, for their MSW degrees. I think survey data that I saw a while back showed that on average, African Americans are spending about $90,000 to get an MSW from the start of the bachelor's degree to completion of MSW. And so to compound it with the many times that an individual has taken the test, as Mr. Joseph demonstrated to us, is really problematic. Now, after the death of George Floyd, we saw statements from the American Psychological Association basically apologizing for its past racism. We saw statements from the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, the American Psychological Association, as well as the National Association of Social Workers, all apologizing for past activities. And ASWB put out a statement saying that it believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racist practices, and that it would not engage in discriminatory practices. We are calling for ASWB to live up to its pledge. And Mr. Joseph should not have to pay another dime to take an examination. In fact, NAD, the National Association of Deans and Directors, is calling for the immediate suspension of all fees associated with test taking and a rebate paid to persons such as Mr. Joseph, who have taken the test multiple times, for people who have not had, who engaged in this testing bias, as well as age groups. We need to see the suspension of the interstate compact that's being proposed for interstate portability of license until the test is standardized such that this testing bias is woven out of it. And we need to have a review of recent legislative remedies in Illinois, as well as Rhode Island. ASWB needs to review those. I think the state of Utah, where I'm at, is thinking about doing a similar thing, because we have a real need for mental health practitioners, and this holds people up in terms. And so I got an email yesterday from the Commission on Accreditation, part of the Council on Social Work Education, decoupling reaffirmation of social work programs with the licensing examination. So I applaud that. So basically, they're saying part of your accreditation process now is not passing this license exam because they understand that the test is biased. So I'm calling for CSWE to speak up. I'm calling for the National Association of Social Workers to speak up. I'm calling for the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare to speak up. And I'm calling for the leadership roundtable of those organizations to speak up and speak out against this crisis. This needs to stop immediately. There is thing is now. And so we should do this now. ASWB should apologize for its activities, and it should also cease and desist from any activity that continues to promulgate the bias testing that is engaged in the past. I'll stop right there.
I'm like, I want you to keep going. Let's stop right there. Thank you so much for sharing your words and your wisdom with us. The last person that we'll hear from is Joel Rubin, who is the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers, Illinois chapter.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I am the Executive Director of the Illinois chapter of NASW here in Illinois. We are, as many of you know, the largest organization of social workers in the state, and we advocate on behalf of 20,000 social workers statewide. And I'm also a licensed social worker here in the state. Obviously, we know that the ASWB released their long-awaited report on the first-time pass rates for social workers who have taken the licensure test. And as everyone has said already, it's been a long process resulting from years of advocacy from social work organizations and advocates to force a report in which ASWB was not willing to release. I'm going to actually really focus in on sort of the efforts we did here in Illinois. So even before the data was released, our chapter took a look at this, took on this issue of barriers to licensure via the ASWB test. And on August 6, 2021, Governor J.B. Pritzker, that's our governor here in Illinois, signed Senate Bill 1632 into law, which removed testing requirements for licensed social workers. In Illinois, there's LSWs, that's the non-clinical level of licensure that Cassandra had noted earlier in her introductory remarks, which became effective January 1 of this year. This achievement was sponsored by a state senator, Karina Villa, who's a school social worker, and Representative Lindsay LaPointe, who's an MSW graduate, and has already paved the way for a massive increase in licensed social workers here in Illinois. And we are a state that is in desperate need of mental health professionals, especially BIPOC social workers. So in the first 6 months of this new law, just under 3,000 LSWs became licensed in Illinois. That's an increase from 421 for the same period in 2021. To say removing this barrier to access has been a success is an understatement. And I just want to just point out too that when we were developing the legislation in simultaneous discussions with our Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, the data showed that this population poses little risk to the public and that rigorous pre- and post-graduation supervision requirements coupled with existing Illinois requirements, in other words, all LSWs performing clinical social worker must be under the order and control and full professional responsibility of a licensed clinical social worker, created an environment where additional testing became simply unnecessary. So as the numbers bear out, the passage of our LSW law continues to allow BSWs to continue a path to licensure and employment in the profession. It's removed the burden to access that disproportionately affects BIPOC communities and social workers without resources to pursue an MSW. It removed another financial strain on recent MSW graduates and BSWs who have already completed their 3 years of postgraduate supervision by waiving the exam and exam prep courses associated with licensure. It's also created a logical path for MSWs to become LSWs while collecting the required supervisions for becoming a licensed clinical social worker in our state. It allows these individuals to be legally called social workers while giving IDFPR a better oversight of those currently unregulated professionals. And lastly, it creates a much needed path for macro level social workers to be legally called social workers and become licensed as a social worker in Illinois. While Illinois continues to use the ASWB test for licensed clinical social workers, we are determined to work with stakeholders in Illinois to create an equitable path for these fully licensed seekers, one that supports our mental health graduates, not bars them from employment. Lastly, I just want to note about our chapter is call for swift change and access and justice for BIPOC social workers in the BIPOC community at large with the following recommendations, similar to what our couple of other speakers have said today. One is to abolish the current testing model and reconstruct a new model in collaboration with Council of Social Work Education and NASW to create a more fair, unbiased, and inclusive path to licensure. Secondly, that reparations be allocated to members of the BIPOC social worker community in the form of test waivers for individuals who have been unsuccessful with passing the licensing exam. Third, a commitment and action plan outlining ways to diversify the social work workforce in our country, including but not limited to an investment in initiatives and incentives aimed at recruiting BIPOC clinicians into a profession to directly address these disparities. I've said this already for the past month or two, that we are at a time where our profession is at a seminal moment in our history, and the way forward will look to measure competencies in a fair and just way and continue to sustain social workers to leading helping profession inclusive of all races and communities. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Joel, for being with all of us and sharing just the wonderful work that, and those who know me outside of this space, but for what I'm about to say, but like the wonderful work that the NASW Illinois chapter is doing, because I know I got beef with the national chapter of the NASW, but shout out to the work that y'all are doing at the state level. So I just want to thank all of our speakers for sharing their stories and their experiences with us. We are going to have a moment for some Q&A if folks in attendance do have questions for any of the speakers, and then we'll close with a call of action. I'll also just note that some people have elected to stay behind after the call of action for any community building and story sharing. And so if your schedule allows for that, please hang on, but we will open it up for a brief Q&A if folks have any questions for our speakers today. Or words if you don't have questions.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, is this the time for question and answers? I was just typing something and, kind of multitasking, but did I hear you say this is the time for questions? Okay, I want to make a comment first. I really want to thank all of you for putting this together. I'm an African-American Black woman. I'm over the age of 50. I have worked in the mental health industry for quite some time when I only needed a bachelor's degree. I completed internships at the Wayne County Jail. I worked in an all-girls residential facility. I've worked in a mental health hospital for children. And I've worked in a few places and, I've gone up in my career and, learned various things. And no one has talked about the test prep organizations that are also making probably millions of dollars. So they're another organizations, it's other organizations that are exploiting us as well because they know we want to pass this exam so bad. And, the other thing about the test prep organizations is that when I've taken my exam, it makes me sign things saying you will not discuss this exam, the content on the exam. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 layers. You can't talk about the exam. So I'm asking the people here on this Zoom meeting, how are some of those organizations able to say, study this for the ASWB exam? You'll find this on the ASWB exam. Do this for, so you can pass the ASWB exam, and you'll find this, and they'll say this. And how are they able to do that? Dawn Apcart, bless her heart, I don't know her personally. She's making millions and probably billions off of all of her test prep things. I mean, so my comment, so many people are raking in millions and in the billions of dollars because we want to help someone. We don't carry guns. We don't pass out medication. And to make us continue, like everyone is saying, it doesn't really reflect what you do. You know what I'm saying? The test. And so it's just so many layers and organizations that are making money off of I have personally spent over $3,000, I'm sure, on taking the exam, test prep, TCD, Dawn Apcart, pocket prep, monthly fees for that. I'm at my wit's end. So that's what brings me here. I know I've, said a whole lot of things, but, I also want to touch on what Gerald touched on as it relates to the mental stress that you're under. I'm taking away time from my family, time from my friends, time I could be doing other things. I'm studying. No, I can't. I graduated in 2017. I've literally taken this test, almost every year, if not twice a year. So I'm like, what, and I'm beating myself up like, why is this happening? I got experience at a 3.9, when I graduated, with my master's degree. What's going on? Is something wrong with me? Another point, I even asked my doctor, I said, I think I need to get, some type of MRI or something, because this, I'm not, something's going on. Maybe it's my memory or something. And she went on to say, well, what's going on? Are you losing keys, or, are you leaving things in the refrigerator? I mean, tell me, what do you mean by not, you think you need an MRI for your memory? And I said, because I keep studying for this exam, every so many months, and I'm taking it and I'm still not passing. I think I need an MRI or something, because maybe is something wrong. I really want to be checked out. And she humbled herself and talked to me, as a, lady to lady, person to person. She said, it's not you. She said, these exams are biased. And I've been seeing the same doctor for over 10 years. So if something was going on, she and I would have been able to identify it. So she was saddened that I wanted to get an MRI or some kind of neurological CAT scan or whatever it's called. I'm not quite sure. But she told me how these exams are biased. She said, she could probably, because she's, I don't want to add anything, but she said she started taking standardized tests when she was a very little girl. She said, because the exams are set up a certain way, she would probably be able to get the answers right just based on how many times she's taken it, what she know they're looking for. Even if she said she hadn't studied in that field, she's been trained to look for certain things that would probably help her pass it. She said, but she's seen it in the medical industry too.
Miss
So
Grant,
that is really biased, but okay, I'm sorry.
I'm going to slow you down a little bit because, well, first, I just wanted to thank you for feeling safe enough with all of us to go that deep, all right, with your experiences. And like other people in the chat have reflected back, I am sad and also very angry that you had to feel those things and have that level of doubt about the skill sets that you have.
Yeah.
And much of what you're speaking to is just around a system that exploits, right? And then the particular one we're focused on is how social workers are exploited by a system that is a multi-billion-dollar system that's sustained by pain and suffering. And so we are dealing with a really large beast. And so, yes, we know that it has many heads, and the one head that we're focused on here is the ASWB, but that doesn't mean we can't ignore the other ones that are at work. But I do just want to acknowledge some of the other questions that have come up and try to give our panel a chance to address them. But before I do read a question and I do see a hand raised, I do want to make sure people who are with us still, and if you have to drop off, that's fine, you're aware of what our call to action is, right? And so that first one is, if you have not signed the change.org pledge or actions of signatures, please do so. Someone would put the link in the chat, please hit the link, sign the petition to stop the ASWB. The other is to get involved at your state level. And so there's another link that will be shared with you where you can sign up, and the organizing group will work to connect you with people at your state level. And I'll just kind of shout out, if you're in Virginia, we are currently organizing. We have a meeting coming up on August 31st. I'll put my information. Please feel free to reach out to me. The other is the same.
You were muted.
I got you. I just caught it. Please continue to share your stories and do so. If you're going to share it on social media, please use the hashtag #StopASWB, right? And then our last call to action is to let us know if you're interested in putting some legal action against the ASWB, because laws and policy, they talk, right?
Well, that was my question.
Policy changes, we can freeze power. So we have to think about the laws and the policies behind this change we're seeking. And so I do just want to make sure people are aware of those call to action. Sign the petition and spread the word. The link is in the bio. Get involved at the state level. That link is in your bio as well. Continue to share your stories out loud, online, with each other. And then if you want to get involved in some legal action, please let this organizing group know. And so I'm going to stop there. And then if people have to drop off because your day has to continue to go outside of this virtual space, please do so. If you want to hang around for more conversation, community building, and questions, we're going to revisit that. I do see a question that came in the chat box, and I see a hand raised. So I'm happy to go in either direction. I lost the question in the chat, but I do still see a hand raised for Dr. Dana Harmon. So if you wanted to come and offer your voice to the conversation.
Thank you, Kim. I think Shimon had the question in the chat first. So Shimon.
Thank you. I was trying to find it.
Yeah, I just remembered it. So Shimon, if you don't mind, just go ahead and ask your question, and then I can follow you. Or you put it in the chat, just say what it is. I can't see it anymore. It's submitted somewhere, but I want to speak for Shimon's question.
Thanks, Dr. Dana. Hey, everyone. Yeah, I was just wondering about the strategy for, what people think, especially Joel, who's had success in Illinois. I'm in Florida, and we have just the clinical exam here. I don't mean just, but as it minimizes anything. But my understanding is it's in the administrative rule for the board, and there's going to be a lot of pushback because those board seats are also, part of a political process. And for anyone who knows Florida, we've got a very right-wing situation here with the governor. So just kind of, I know every state's going to have different strategy, but just if anyone can share some thoughts on how to best proceed to, try to get this exam removed at the state level.
So Shimon, this is Joel. I think like you said, I think it depends on the state. And it depends on one's relationship with their Department of Regulation as well. So, as I briefly outlined in my remarks, we did a lot of due diligence with our Department of Regulation, really talking about and discussing issues around non-clinical licensees and protecting the public. And as I said, that group of initial licensees in the state were low risk. So that's why we went ahead with it. And we also felt this was a huge equity issue too. That was, this is a huge barrier to access to the profession. Here in Illinois, we've spent the past 2 years, two and a half years, looking at social workforce issues and the barriers to entry and advancements. And I can tell you, and I've said this to my colleagues across the country, that the number of people that contact us after we passed this law and said, you know what, I've not been able to get promoted. I've missed I haven't been able to pass the initial exam. So I think it's just getting a read on your own state. I mean, Rhode Island filed suit passing a similar law that went into effect, I believe, in July. And so that's really it. So, that it really depends on that. I think, again, I'm going to say we are at a really seminal and historic time in our profession. There's some short-term goals and I think long-term issues that we all have to really work together on accomplishing.
I'd like to ask a quick question. He just mentioned goals. What would be all of our goals? Everybody on the phone in each state where we're located, what would you say our goal is?
So I think it's helpful to reference the petition. The petition has a number of goals that are highlighted at the bottom of it. So if somebody wants to drop the link again, so it's at the top of the chat. But I think it'd be difficult to drill it down because like what Joel just said, it's very state specific what the strategies must look like. And I think they have it complicated like that for us for a reason. But in terms of the collective that brought us together today, there are a number of goals that are outlined at the bottom of that petition. I don't want to forget that Dr. Harmon had a question or comment for the group.
Yeah, I'll come off camera. I usually don't, but I'll go in this space because I think it's important.
So before you do that, are you okay with this being reported and possibly used in newsreel footage? We can stop recording if you are not.
Oh, my colleagues know that I'm on this, so I don't have a problem.
I just informed consent is important. Sorry.
And we're supposed to be advocates, right? I mean, are we supposed to be about social justice and all that kind of stuff? So why should we hide? So that's my position on this. But thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate that. So I just want to say I saw that there were a couple of deans in here, and now they're not in the room in this space. I don't see them. So first of all, I just, want to know what are deans and social work programs doing about this. Without sharing a lot, I, was in a meeting yesterday because the academic year has started. And I think it's very important for those of us in social work education, as we go into the classroom and talk with students or students, share this or even our own experiences. Like I put in the chat that I had been practicing for 23 years and then decided to take the clinical exam because my mentor, really wanted me to. And I was like, I don't need it. She was the one that said, Dana, I just want to be honest with you. You're going to have to think like you're white. And she did that to protect me. You know what I mean? To try to look out for me. So I think it's important for those of us as social work, let me not say those of us, white social work educators to be very clear and use the language. Not say these exams are problematic. That's sanitizing it. They need to use the language and say it's racist. It's just, it's ageist. It's discriminatory. This water downing, that I always hear in social work education is not good and healthy, especially for those of us who are faculty in predominantly white institutions, and specifically for our students who are in predominantly white institutions and rarely see somebody that looks like me in their classroom space. So that's the first thing I want to say. I'm looking for our deans. I know Dr. Detlef is on it. He's always open and stuff like that as an example, but we need leadership and true leadership in social work education, or else we're continuing to damage and not do right by our students. The other thing that I want to say is every state is different. So although I'm employed by a university, and my name is up there, so you can just Google and you know what university I work at, but I'm employed by a university in Illinois, and I'm very proud of what Illinois is doing. However, because I work remotely, I live in Alabama, and I've been licensed in the state of Alabama since 1999. So there's more implications in terms of licensure for me in the state. The Monday after the report came out, I called my licensing board. So they had to stay on the phone for like 17 more minutes than what they wanted to. But their first comment was no comment about the report and just kind of wanted to get off the phone. But that didn't happen because they didn't know they figured out who they were talking to. The other thing was they brought up where, we're a regulating body and, by the laws in the state of Alabama. I said, oh, you mean those same discriminatory races, et cetera, laws in the state of Alabama? Those laws are what you're regulated by? And then the third thing was, which I'm hearing is state regulator, state board saying protecting the public. That's our job. I said, well, I've been practicing in this state since 1999. And for me, protecting the public is we now have restrictions on women's health, for example, right, in the state. What happens to my license if somebody decides to file a complaint because I'm ethically trying to protect the public, which is predominantly Black communities, which is known as Black belt or marginalized communities in the state. She said to me, well, you'll just go through the investigation and we'll see what happens. I've never had a complaint. I've never been faced with this. Now I am. So, Illinois is awesome. You got Governor Pritzker. I have Governor Ivey. Okay. And the rest of these, Republican off the wall kind of politicians. So I think I agree with the petition. I have met some of you all through Twitter because of this. So advocacy and connecting has been great, but a petition of how to mobilize and all that is going to be way more difficult for me in the state of Alabama than it would be if I was in the state of Illinois. Lastly, NASW Alabama, their phone number on their website doesn't even work. So, you know what I mean? So I don't even know, what am I supposed to do? Get in the car and drive down and ring the doorbell because it's in the same city where I live. But that's what I'm saying. So NASW state chapters, state licensing boards are all different. So I'm asking those of you all that are in states, I know of Joel because of many different things, and we have a connection because of the institution of which I'm employed. I would like for all other states where it's not as difficult, like what's happening in Illinois, to help and support us where we live in states or are practicing in states or teach students or whatever, or interact with students to help us in the fight. We can't be in silos. We got to do this together. So that's what I want to say. And Jared, so nice to see your face as opposed to the Twitter and other people I've met.
Very quickly, I'm sorry, I just didn't want to lose this. So you would say social work education, those institutions, the universities, when you, what would you say that the goal would be for the field instructors or for those who are directly teaching in universities?
Just a quick thought, because I see other hands and I want to make sure that those other hands get heard. I would say, first of all, Black social workers, we when we were students and educators, this is our life. This ain't new. We always talking about this. So I want and need white social workers to be on the forefront. And that's why I said, use the language. Because again, it burdens me once again as a Black person in America that I already got to deal with that. And then I got to deal with the fights at work. And then I got to be the DEI person and the vocal one, but then I'm an angry Black woman too. You know what I mean? So I think social work education in terms of predominantly white institutions need to be on the forefront and not watered down and say, you know, like I said earlier, as opposed to putting it on the back of me. I mean, I'm teaching diversity, oppression, and privilege in a week or so. I'm gonna talk about this stuff. I'm gonna be real nice and polite. I talk about this all the time, regardless of what class I'm teaching or interacting. But my white colleagues need to step up more and not expect me to always do it. That's my quick answer.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So are we educating the white professionals? Because I've been in a lot of trainings lately. That's what they're doing. So that could be a goal then, that we would be educating our peers,
Let me just say this, and then I'm gonna let somebody else go. They live in the same United States of America or whatever that I do. They have the same degrees. What do I need to educate them about? And then when I try to educate, then they mad, you know, or some of them, or they don't want to hear what I have to say. So I'm kind of tired of educating my colleagues. I want to educate students, you know what I mean? And who come to me. So that's just me. I'm just speaking as Dana. I'm not speaking as everybody else, but I'm tired of educating white folk.
Yeah.
And I mean white colleagues, not students, white colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and for the conversation back and forth. I know we can get really caught up in wanting a solution in the moment, but sometimes they just don't exist. And the work or the goal, especially for Black people, might actually be to rest during some of this, right? Like, how do we actually step back and recognize like which parts of this are actually our fight? And that can be real difficult, especially for Black women who are put in positions to fight for change and don't even know how exhausted you are by doing it. And so it could be tough and trying to identify a goal, but sometimes we got to be okay with just not having answers. I know that I am. There have been 2 hands that have been raised. And so I do want to just make room for them. And I also want to manage expectations. I know other people who are a part of the organizing group are on this call, but y'all got to get back to life in 5 minutes. So I'm going to have to log on. So someone else will need to step in and just kind of help support this conversation going back and forth. And then I do just want to make note from what Dr. Harmon shared around just organizing strategies and how we shouldn't do it in silos and how every state is different. So are regions. I'm also in the South.
Recording stopped.
What happens in the Midwest, West Coast, the East Coast cannot happen in the South, but we can deploy strategies that work for us. So I'm down to organize with other people in Southern states because I think we understand the culture here and some of the strategies that will work and not work. And so I see that Christine has her hand raised, and then I don't want to mess up that beautiful name. So I'm gonna just go with last name Powell. And then from there, we'll just kind of see who raised their hand to speak next. So we'll go with Christine and then last name Powell.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Christine, and I am a social worker in Texas. And I think with so many things on our plate in the South that kind of differ, especially with just so much right-wing backlash, across all mental health fields and other aspects of our lives, I guess I'm kind of lost in what would be the best place to direct my efforts in advocacy and to organize around that might still have some level of impact given the context that we're in Texas.
Does anyone want to tackle that?
So I'm not in Texas, but oh wait, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Yeah, I'm not in Texas. I know some folks who are. And y'all's board met yesterday, and disappointing to say, expected, disappointing to say the least, as far as their we're not going to do anything kind of an answer. And so when it comes to states that are going to be the hardest places, I would say find those folks who are starting the push so that you can organize, because most likely you're going to need federal legal action against the state, right? Because now that the data's out, the great thing, and what I was mentioning, like historically before, about there being precedents for suing state boards for utilizing known racist measures, is that you can sue the government. That is a lot easier than ASWB as far as historical precedent goes. And so getting a group and finding a lawyer willing to take the case to try and take your state board to court about using an exam that they now know is provably biased may be the best route to go, in addition to just building and cultivating that community to support each other with the struggle, because organizing is rough, and we got to remember to maintain our joy and our rest and our boundaries while doing it. And so also, connecting with folks like us in Illinois, because we're doing the work and have a lot of things going well. And so that means that, as the person before was mentioning, we can help support as folks that hey, here is a template of yes, you can do something, and continually pushing back on we can't do anything. It's in this and it's in that. Okay, change the legislation, change the board policy, change the board ruling. And if you won't change it, get ready for legal battles, because this is work that has been done in other professions. There's no reason we as social workers, built on supposedly organizing and advocating, there's no reason we should not be able to advocate for ourselves, including in the places it's hardest, and especially in the places where it's hardest, because it's hardest because those are the places that the people that need the most help are. So I unfortunately have to start heading out, but my contact information is fairly easy. Hit me up on Twitter and such as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I think this part of this is organizing, right? This is going to take a little bit of time to get us all connected, but I'm amazed at the turnout so far. We had 90 people today. We've had over 3,600 people sign the petition. So we're building a network. We're building a campaign, a movement right now. And so stay connected to us. You'd be amazed at what a direct action will do to try to light a fire under some of these small boards. So let's be in conversation about what we can do both at the state level, but also broadly. So is it Acacia? Thank you for being patient. This will be our last question before we wrap up at noon Chicago time.
Yeah, so my name is Acacia, and I just wanted to hop on really quick. I don't necessarily have a big question, but I wanted to make a comment. So I'm a first-year MSW student, and as I navigated the coursework in my classes and being trained to do this social work, I feel like our classes don't help support and prepare us for the examination process. I feel like every time I ask for support or resources about how I can best prepare myself as a student, initially it was, you'll get a lot of that experience in your field practicum. And I don't fully appreciate that these internships are unpaid, because I feel like it's exploiting free work of graduate students. And I just think that schools also need to be doing more to help prepare us, because if I'm paying for this education and then you're passing me off to get a license to get a payable job, a decent job, there should be more support for students. So I feel like I would like to see some resources shared for students specifically to challenge our social work departments to help advocate for students. and also to address what they're going to do in our classes to help make sure that we're prepared or supported along that process, because it's not something that we should figure out post-graduation and then have to be sucked into this racist cycle of trying to pay these organizations a whole bunch of money to pass something that's not set up for especially BIPOC groups to pass. I recently did a free question for an ASW prep exam, and there were 10 questions. And as I got through the first 5, my answers were incorrect. And I learned, oh, there's a system and there's a game to play here and how you answer these questions. And when I learned the system and the answers that they were looking for, I was able to then be like, okay, let's play the game. And I started to pass. The last 5 questions I got correct. So I realized that these exams don't allow for a culturally responsive way to address issues for our clients. My university helps make sure that we have that cultural approach. But I guess that shows where some of this harm is being done to BIPOC groups and having us respond to certain questions in a certain way when they're not culturally responsive. So overall, just looking for more support for students to help advocate and demand that we get the support and resources that we need as well.
Super important point. As someone, I think Kim was saying, there's so many heads to this, right? To this sort of racist system that's really continuing to perpetuate white supremacy in our field. And I agree with Dr. Teasley's point that this really is, and I think Joel's point as well, this is a crisis moment for the field of social work. And so that's part of why we are so grateful that you all made time today, that you all showed up. Very, very thankful to all of our speakers who showed up today as well and shared their wisdom and their passion for this. Please stay in touch with us. Many of us are on Twitter. Fill out the forms, fill out the petition, and spread the word, right? There are way more of us than there are of whoever on ASWB. So let's take this passion, let's keep building this campaign, and let's get these victories, because I think that we have some really great momentum here, and but we need one another. We can't do this alone. So thank you all. We'll be in touch, and have a great rest of your Thursday. Peace.